A lot of people think London Calling is just another punk album. They're wrong. This album isn't about rebellion or anger or three-chord fury. It's about something way more terrifying than that. It's about watching everything fall apart and knowing there's nothing you can do to stop it. December 1978. The Clash are sitting in a rehearsal space in London and they're completely broke. Their last album bombed. Their record label CBS wants them gone. The press is calling them sellouts. And punk, the movement they helped create, is eating itself alive. Joe Strummer, the band's frontman, is having panic attacks. Mick Jones, the guitarist, hasn't written a decent song in months. Paul Simonon, the bassist, is so frustrated he wants to quit. And Topper Headon, the drummer, is spiraling into an addiction that will eventually destroy him. So what do? They decide to make an album about the apocalypse. But here's the thing, this isn't some metaphor. They genuinely believed the world was ending. Nuclear meltdown, environmental collapse, economic catastrophe, political chaos. They looked around at 1979 and saw nothing but darkness ahead. And in the middle of all that fear and desperation, they did something that would either save them or finish them off completely. Nobody, not the band, not their label, not even their producer, knew if it would work. But why? Why did a band with nothing left to lose bet everything on an album that broke every rule punk had? And what happens when your apocalypse album is the thing that's supposed to save you from your own apocalypse? That's the question. And the answer is way more complicated than anyone expected. Let's rewind a bit. 1977. The Clash released their first album and changed everything. Raw, furious, political. It was punk at its absolute peak. Then came Give 'Em Enough Rope in 1978, and suddenly people weren't so sure anymore. The album sold better than the first, but something felt off. It was too polished, too American. The production was slick, the guitars were huge, and the punk purists hated it. The British music press, who had built the Clash up as the saviors of rock and roll, turned on them immediately. Sellouts. Corporate punks. The Clash have lost it. Joe Strummer felt every word. He was the one who believed in punk as a movement, as a way to actually change things. And now people were saying he'd abandoned it all for commercial success. But the real problem wasn't the critics. The real problem was the band itself. They were barely speaking to each other. Joe and Mick were fighting constantly about musical direction. Paul felt ignored. Topper was disappearing for days at a time. And their manager, Bernie Rhodes, had just been fired, leaving them without any guidance. Oh, and they owed CBS a fortune. The label had given them a massive advance for their second album, expecting it to make them stars in America. When it didn't, CBS started asking questions. Where's the hit single? Where's the radio-friendly song? When are you going to make us our money back? The Clash had two options. Make a safe, commercial album to please the label, or make something completely insane and risk losing everything. Their contract, their reputation, maybe even the band itself. You can probably guess which one they chose. But choosing the risky path and actually pulling it off? Those are two very different things. Summer 1979. The band is in a tiny rehearsal space called Vanilla Studios in London. They've been jamming for weeks but nothing's clicking. Joe's writing lyrics about nuclear disaster. Mick's experimenting with reggae grooves. Paul's frustrated because nobody's listening to him. And Topper's just trying to keep everyone from killing each other. Then one day, Joe brings in a newspaper. The headline, London calling to the faraway towns. Now war is declared and battle come down. It's a BBC World Service phrase from World War II, the signal that broadcasts were about to begin during the Blitz. And Joe's been obsessing over it. Because to him, 1979 feels exactly like that. Like the world is on the edge of something catastrophic and someone needs to sound the alarm. So he writes the title track, 3 chords, furious energy. A list of apocalyptic scenarios that feel ripped from the headlines. Nuclear error, the ice age, engines stopping, wheat dying in the fields, floods, zombies, cops, the end of everything. When he plays it for the band, something shifts. Mick realizes this isn't going to be a punk album. It's going to be something bigger, something that captures the absolute terror and chaos of living through 1979. And if they're going to do it right, they need to stop caring about what punk is supposed to sound like. So they make a decision. No rules. Reggae? Sure. Rockabilly? Why not? Jazz? Let's try it. Ska? Absolutely. Lounge music? If it works, it works. They're going to throw everything at the wall and see what survives. Because if the world's ending anyway, what's the point of playing it safe? But there's one massive problem. They have no money. And CBS isn't about to give them any. CBS is done with The Clash. The label sees them as a failed investment, a punk band that couldn't transition to mainstream success. So when the band asks for studio time to record their new album, CBS gives them the cheapest option available. Wessex Sound Studios in North London. A dingy, outdated facility mostly used for jingles and B-sides. The budget is so tight that the band has to record quickly. No endless takes, no expensive production tricks, no time to overthink anything. And honestly, that might be exactly what they need. Or it might be the thing that destroys the album before it even exists. They bring in Guy Stevens as producer, and if you don't know who Guy Stevens is, imagine the most chaotic, unpredictable, borderline insane person you've ever met, then multiply that by 10. Guy was a legend in British rock. He'd worked with Mott the Hoople, discovered Procol Harum, and was known for his completely unhinged recording methods. His philosophy? Chaos creates magic. During recording sessions, Guy would throw chairs across the studio to get the band energized. He'd pour wine on the mixing board. He'd scream at them between takes. He'd play old rock and roll records at full volume to set the mood. He'd climb ladders in the studio and literally throw himself off them onto the floor to create atmosphere. The band thought he was insane. But Guy understood something crucial. The Clash were overthinking everything. They were so worried about critics, about CBS, about whether they were still punk enough, that they'd forgotten how to just play. Guy's job wasn't to make them sound polished, it was to make them sound alive. So they recorded fast, really fast. Most songs were done in just a few takes. No overdubs, no perfection. If someone made a mistake, they kept it. If a take had raw energy, that was the one they used. The whole album was recorded in just a few weeks, and it cost less than most bands spent on a single song. And in that cramped, chaotic studio, something started to happen. Whether it was good or catastrophic, nobody could tell yet. But they were running out of time to figure it out. Here's where it gets interesting. Because what the Clash were recording wasn't just songs, they were building something that could either redefine what punk could be, or prove that punk was dead and they'd killed it. Every track was a risk. Every choice was a gamble. London Calling opens the album with nuclear disaster and environmental catastrophe. It's the alarm bell. But will anyone actually listen? Then comes Brand New Cadillac, a rockabilly cover that's just pure violent energy. No message, no politics, just the Clash proving they could play anything, or trying to prove it anyway. The songs kept coming, each one stranger than the last. There's Jimmy Jazz, a weird, jazzy experiment about a criminal on the run. It shouldn't work at all. Hateful is Joe Strummer screaming about how much he hates himself, hates London, hates everything. It's uncomfortable. It's supposed to be. But is it too uncomfortable? Rudy Can't Fail is a ska song about a young hustler who refuses to grow up. It's playful, but there's this sadness underneath. Like watching someone pretend everything's fine while their life falls apart. Sound familiar? Then comes Spanish bombs, and suddenly everything shifts. It's about the Spanish Civil War, but also about terrorism in modern Spain, and about tourists partying on beaches where people died fighting fascism. It's beautiful and haunting and angry all at once. The right profile is about Montgomery Clift, the Hollywood actor who destroyed his face in a car accident and never recovered. It's sung from the perspective of a director trying to film Clift's good side because the other side is too damaged to show. If you're paying attention, you realize it's about the Clash too. Everyone wanting their good side while ignoring how broken they are. Lost in the Supermarket is Paul Simonon's story, but sung by Joe. It's about growing up in a sterile commercial world where everything is packaged and sold and nothing feels real. It's one of the saddest songs they've ever written. And then there's Clampdown. This is Joe Strummer at his most furious. It's about how the system crushes you, how you start out rebellious and angry, and then one day you look in the mirror and realize you've become exactly what you hated. You grow up and you calm down. You're working for the clampdown. Is he singing about other people? Or is he terrified it's already happening to him? The Guns of Brixton lets Paul Simonon finally sing his own song. And it's a reggae-influenced warning about police violence in South London. Paul grew up in Brixton, and this song is his lived experience. What it's like when cops treat your neighborhood like a war zone. Death or Glory asks the most dangerous question on the entire album. What happens when rebels get old? Every generation promises to change the world, and every generation ends up selling out. Is there any way to avoid it? Joe doesn't have an answer, and that's terrifying. The card cheat is 7 minutes long and absolutely devastating. It's about a gambler who gets caught cheating and knows he's about to be killed. The arrangement is massive, strings, piano, this cinematic build. And in the final verse, Joe sings about how we're all just gambling with our lives, hoping we don't get caught. Then the album was supposed to end. But it didn't, because something completely unexpected happened in those final days of recording. Train in Vain was written at the last minute. Mick Jones had been going through a breakup, and he channeled all that pain into a straightforward love song. No politics, no apocalypse, just, "You said you loved me, but you didn't really mean it." The band recorded it as a potential B-side, but Guy Stevens heard it and insisted it go on the album. The problem? The album artwork was already printed. The track list was finalized. There was no way to add it to the cover, so they just stuck it on anyway, as a hidden track. At the time, nobody thought much of it. It was just a pop song, a throwaway moment after all that apocalyptic intensity. Nobody knew it would change everything. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, because first, the album had to actually come out. And CBS was not happy with what they were about to release. While the album was being mixed, the band needed artwork, and they were completely broke, so they couldn't afford some elaborate photo shoot. Then Paul Simonon had an idea. Months earlier, The Clash had played a show at the Palladium in New York City. The venue had strict rules, no moshing, no stage diving. Everyone had to stay in their seats. The crowd was furious. The energy was dead. And Paul, frustrated beyond belief, lifted his bass guitar and smashed it into the stage. A photographer named Penny Smith captured the moment. When she showed the band the photo later, she said it was too blurry to use. But Paul loved it, because that image, a musician destroying his instrument out of sheer frustration, captured exactly what the album was about. Ray Lowry, the band's designer, took that photo and created what would become one of the most iconic album covers in rock history. He styled it after Elvis Presley's first album with bold pink and green lettering. The contrast was perfect. Elvis, the symbol of rock and roll's birth, and Paul Simonon smashing his bass like he was trying to kill rock and roll for good. Creation and destruction in one image. When CBS saw the cover, they hated it. They said it looked cheap. They said the photo was out of focus. They said it wouldn't sell. The Clash told them to use it anyway. And then came an even bigger fight. December 14th, 1979. London Calling is about to be released in the UK as a double album. And here's where things get really complicated. A double album in 1979 cost a fortune. Most double albums sold for $10 or more. An absurd amount of money for working class fans. But the Clash insisted that London Calling be sold for the price of a single album, $5. CBS was furious. They were already losing money on the band, and now the Clash were demanding they sell the album at a loss. The label threatened to cancel the release entirely, but the band wouldn't budge. They'd made an album about economic collapse and nuclear war. They weren't going to price out the people who actually lived through those fears. So CBS reluctantly agreed, but they made it clear, if this album failed, the Clash were done. When the album came out, critics didn't know what to make of it. Some loved it, some hated it, some said it was the death of punk, some said it was the evolution of punk, but almost everyone agreed on one thing. It didn't sound like anything else. The NME gave it a positive review but questioned whether it was too much. Rolling Stone was cautious, praising individual songs but wondering if the band had lost focus. Punk purists accused them of betraying the movement by playing rockabilly and jazz. And commercially, it didn't explode. In the UK, it peaked at number 9 on the charts. Good, but not groundbreaking. In America, it initially stalled outside the top 20. CBS was disappointed. The band was exhausted. And for a moment it seemed like London Calling might just be another critics like it, but nobody buys it album. Another expensive failure. Another reason for CBS to drop them. The Clash had risked everything on this album. And it looked like they might have lost. But then something strange started happening. London Calling didn't die, it just wouldn't go away. People kept listening. And then, Train in Vain, that hidden track, the pop song that wasn't supposed to exist, started getting radio play in the US. Rock stations loved it. Pop stations played it. And suddenly people who would never listen to a punk band were buying London Calling. The album slowly climbed the charts, eventually reaching number 27 in the US, the highest any Clash album had ever charted. But even that wasn't the real story. Because as the 1980s unfolded, everything the Clash had warned about started coming true. The Cold War intensified. Reagan and Thatcher took power. The economy collapsed for working-class communities. Environmental disasters made headlines. Punk evolved into post-punk, new wave, alternative rock, all genres that owed a debt to what the Clash had done. And suddenly that Apocalypse album felt prophetic. By the mid-1980s, London Calling wasn't just a great album. Critics started calling it one of the greatest albums ever made, period. And a whole generation of bands, U2, R.E.M., The Replacements, Nirvana, cited it as a major influence. In 1989, Rolling Stone named it the best album of the 1980s, even though it came out in 1979. The album that almost destroyed the Clash ended up defining them. But defining them didn't save them. So what happened next? The Clash made 2 more albums. Sandinista in 1980 and Combat Rock in 1982. Both had great songs, but neither captured what London Calling had. The band was still falling apart. Joe and Mick couldn't stop fighting. Topper's addiction got worse. He was fired in 1982. And by 1985, the Clash had completely dissolved. Guy Stevens, the producer who helped create London Calling's chaos, died in 1981 from a heart attack. He was only 38. Joe Strummer spent the rest of his life making music, but he never quite escaped the shadow of London Calling. He died in 2002 from a heart defect, just 50 years old. Mick Jones formed Big Audio Dynamite and had success, but nothing close to the Clash. Paul Simonon became an artist and played in various bands, always staying true to the DIY punk ethos. Topper head-on battled addiction for decades before finally getting clean in the 2000s. And London Calling? It just kept growing. In 2003, Rolling Stone ranked it the 8th greatest album of all time. In 2020, they updated the list and moved it to number 16, still one of the highest-ranked albums in rock history. The album cover became so iconic that it's been parodied, referenced, and imitated countless times. Museums have displayed it as art. And that apocalypse the band sang about? We're still living in it. Nuclear anxiety, climate collapse, political chaos, economic inequality. All the fears that fueled London Calling are still here, which is maybe why the album still feels so urgent, so necessary, even 45 years later. So here's the question we started with. Why did a band with nothing left to lose make an album about the apocalypse? Maybe the better question is, what do you do when you think everything's falling apart? Do you give up? Do you play it safe? Do you make something that might fail spectacularly just because you believe it needs to exist? The Clash were broke, desperate, hated by their label, and falling apart as a band. And instead of making a safe album to please CBS, they made an apocalypse album that broke every rule, cost nothing, sold for cheap, and refused to compromise. Whether that was brave or reckless probably depends on who you ask. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the real answer isn't whether London Calling succeeded or failed, but whether the choice to make it, to risk everything on something that might not work, was worth it. The Clash thought the world was ending. And they made something anyway. What would you do?